All right. So I'm happy to introduce Stefan Brandt. Stefan and I go back a long time, since at DigiCash in the previous millennium. And since then,
Right.
Stefan has been pushing the envelope of digital identity ever since. So,
Okay.
here for Stefan.
Thank you. Thanks Marius and Ben for inviting me. It was short notice. I happened to be in the neighborhood at a digital identity meeting by the Liberty Alliance industry consortium. So it was kind of boring. So I'm actually happy that I had a good excuse to leave today. I put together some slides. And I had to make a choice, of course, whether to get more technical or to keep it at a very high level. So I decided to go with the high level overview because there are a lot of issues in digital identity today that are not technical and that prevent the kind of progress that people had been expecting 5-6 years ago. So I'm going to focus a bit on those aspects of digital identity. So as a result, there's going to be some very high level animations really to illustrate the problems at a high level. Excellent.
Top button.
Right. So sort of the historic, well, the traditional setting is, of course, so this slide serves to illustrate some basic terminology and what digital identity really is, what the objectives are, and what some of the basic problems might be. And then we'll get into those in the next slides. Right now, everybody has hundreds, if not thousands, of relationships with businesses, government organizations, and individuals around them. The terminology that has arisen, of course, is sort of, these are identity relations. So each of these parties knows you in a certain way, and sort of technically we think of that as they know a bunch of attributes about you, or specifically values, like your age, where you live, and so forth. It could be your bank that has account information in your account. So these are just attribute values for attributes of any kind. And in a way that represents how a particular party that you deal with knows you. So that's sort of your identity with them. In order to have a recurring relationship with them, when you want to get service or access, those are the typical generic terms for it. You basically identify yourself, and there are two ways to do that. One, it's what we call self-asserted identity. It's basically, here's my username, right? And they'll accept that and let you in, and maybe they'll ask you for some self-generated password or some other authenticator that is proof that it must be you. Notice one thing, and it's so this is really high level. But I'll get to the point later. That in today's world we use, here I made my username maybe Steph. So somewhere, and it's a self-generated one, and I have my self-generated password. At some other organization, when I may have to actually enroll, maybe I have to show one or more other identity tokens, like a password or a driver license and so forth, and then they enroll me and maybe provision me, right? And then they may give me actually some kind of token, which could be a membership card at a gym club, right? So whenever I visit, I present the token at later times, and they can inspect the security properties of that token, and those are, of course, also. So this is just another way of identifying me. Here I'm not using a self-generated identifier, or I might actually. These are also, there are tons of possibilities. That's important to remember, that I may pick my own name there, then they register me, and from that point on, that's how they know me, but they do want to make sure that I cannot use other names, for instance, so that may be one reason for them to give me a token, or a badge, and do at enrollment time some check at a base credential, like a passport, so that they know, okay, I can only get one username there. So, maybe they also want to know that I cannot transfer my access rights to my neighbor, right? So in this case, there may be some special protections on this identifier, really. So to authenticate not just the authenticity of the identifier that I'm presenting, here it's Stefan, but maybe also the security protections around it, so that when they inspect it, they can see we issued that, and it has these security properties, meaning it's not Stefan's neighbor who's showing this. And there's all kinds of techniques in the paper-based world and in the electronic world that we use to establish these different strengths of authenticity. But the ultimate point, of course, is that I am establishing an identity relation here and wherever I go. And in a way, if you think about it, when you meet a friend on the street, the same process happens, right? They have sort of account information on you, which is their perception of who you are. It's basically a bunch of attributes. And initially, they do an identification. And it's like, oh, that's Marius, right? So and then they do a lookup in an account, essentially, with all the relevant attribute information. And from there, they proceed to take action. So it's kind of a very general setting. So now the question, of course, is with the online world, it becomes harder and harder to manage all these different relationships with all these hundreds or thousands of parties, individuals, and organizations. So I do want to emphasize, by the way, here. So let's say here I'm actually using different usernames, right? So it's an important thing with regard to privacy that we'll get to, that how these parties know me, their identity, my identity with them. That's sort of the terminology we use, is not necessarily the same, right? And so, in fact, the identifier that they recognize me under may not be the same. So if they wanted to trace or link, profile my behavior across all their domains, that may be kind of tricky, right? Because is S Brands the same as Stefan? Maybe it's Simon Brands. So, right? So aggregating the account information may result in all kinds of errors, which may make the information of the aggregate value worthless to them, the value of it. So anyway, so there are the two main problems in when you go online and you have all these relations with Amazon and Yahoo and eBay and maybe your bank and you name it, more and more government online services. So the first problem, of course, is one that has been bugging the industry for 10 years, and for the larger audience on the internet, maybe more like 5 years. It's one that's the single sign-on problem, right? You have all these identifiers, usernames. Maybe you have RSA tokens for your company. But these are all ways to identify and then authenticate at different strength levels and with different properties for your own needs and or for the organizational needs. So this is kind of awkward, obviously. So the first problem that digital identity management is trying to solve, both for the enterprise and for the world at large, is can we give the users a very convenient, seamless experience when they log in to different sites where they need to identify and authenticate so that even in the same online session you can just seamlessly go from one to the next and it all remains secure. So now you all probably have heard of Microsoft Passport, which is what started the discussions in industry really about identity. And so that was trying to achieve two things. One was to give the user that single sign-on experience, and the other was, that's the second problem, which is sort of after single sign-on. Should elaborate a little bit on that, is when I have my bank here, let's say, and here I have some government organization, and here I have some online social network. They all have information on me. That's either account information, right? Like my age, my citizenship, and you name it, whatever is relevant for them. Now there is a lot of business value and security value and personal value in an ability to share that information, obviously, across these domains. So basically, what identity management is also trying to address is, can we come up with automated ways that are also giving the user a seamless experience for transferring information that sits in the user's account over here to over there, directly or indirectly, right? So because typically what they may want to know about me, someone else already knows about me. So instead of me having to enter it again, it may be convenient if it sort of, again, seamlessly finds its way from my account over here to over here. And the other reason, of course, apart from convenience for the user, is that these may be sort of credentials in the sense of this is my bank and it says whether or not I have a bad credit status, and that's a potential landlord and they need to know, right? So that's attribute information that in some way needs to get there. So basically the two problems are single sign-on, simplified sign-on for the purists, because with single sign-on is one form of, and the other is data sharing across domains. And of course you have the same problem within the enterprise, where these could be different departments in the enterprise in the same building or maybe in different geographical locations. And this is an employee seeking access to a corporate resource over the network, logging in, and maybe this branch, this is where he works, and now he's visiting somewhere abroad, and he's going to this branch, he's physically accessing a door, or he's actually logging in remotely to a project resource over there, and so then role-based information may need to find its way over there, right? So this is it's an extremely general sort of problem statement, two problem statements. Simple authentication, login, and then the attribute or data sharing across domains. So those are really the two things. Now, what Passport was doing, and I'm actually skipping this here, was really the idea of, okay, you have all these account relations and they all have information about you, to give the user that single sign-on experience and to be able to have any attribute data about the user, flow to the access point, or the service point. Let's just aggregate all that information in a central account. And so whenever the user goes to an organization or an access point or a service provider, right, those are all some sort of those parties he deals with. Of course, this could be a Word document and a PDF file and some project resource. I mean, access point, service provider, it's the same thing. So let's basically aggregate all the information in a central point somewhere, and whenever you go here, they'll basically, it could be a redirection, but you essentially only deal with this central party. You may not even notice it, but it will provision or provide the information to the resource points as needed on their request, and you just authenticate once to that central party. So this was the Microsoft idea with Passport, and of course a lot of businesses, it terrified the hell out of them because they figured over time we're going to be service providers with Microsoft sitting in the middle, sort of controlling all our authentication relations and actually seeing all our client data. So that idea got rejected by big industry players, and so they actually formed into the Liberty Alliance in 2001. Right, so I guess the idea of calling it Liberty had a bit to do with also promotional value of, hey, we're not like this Microsoft centralized monolithic solution, we provide liberty. That was kind of misleading. Anyway, so they initially, after half a year, it was really an effort to try and mitigate the potential damage that this Microsoft Passport thing could do if it would just grow and people wouldn't contest it. So that was quite successful, and they actually decided, what, our approach that we're advocating is kind of useful. It's more decentralized, and so a lot of companies joined. I think it's around 200 member companies, and a lot of the big players have been contributing or are still involved in some way. Ultimately the drivers have been companies like Sun, Nokia, VeriSign, the security companies were involved initially, like RSA, now it's Intel, AOL. You can look up the list online. So what they've been doing is defining specifications that achieve a single sign-on experience in a digital environment, and enable data sharing across domains. So this has been quite successful. So let me get to, it's called federation. And what it really does is, it's still centralized. I mean, but one thing they said was, we're going to carve out a circle for each of us, big players. That's really what it is. So instead of having one Microsoft, that's the only party that can sort of sit in the middle and control all these authentication relations and facilitates ultimately all the interactions, where all of us should be able to do that. That was the first change they did, right? So the mobile operators and so forth, we all should be able to deal with our clients and in a similar fashion. But they also recognized in the Microsoft approach, of course, that the fact that, so in the Microsoft approach, basically this party would actually collect all the information that normally would be collected by these service providers that you deal with, right? So they also said, okay, there can be many of us, but we're also not going to collect the actual attribute information, the account information that they have on you. We assume these are corporate branches or organizations, or whatever, and they should maintain the actual account information themselves. So what we're going to do is basically facilitate the flow of attribute information between them and give the user that single sign-on experience without aggregating all this account information at all these places. So there were two sort of premises on which they started to liberate more really the organizational autonomy. So right, we'll get a bit to what it means for individuals actually quite fast. So what happens in a federated approach is really that, so you go to a party, access point or whatever, and you say, I want service, right? So in some way, it's going to have to authenticate you. So this is for the single sign-on experience. So it's simply going to ask the central party, and that may be done through redirection, right? So it's going to ask who that is. And so this is called the identity provider in this terminology. It could be your bank. It could be a government organization. It's a party that already knows you and hopefully has a strong authentication relation with you. Maybe you actually have entered into their office at one point, shown your passport. And so it sort of knows you better than maybe these parties can know you, or strong, with more security guarantees or whatever. So you may actually already have, if this is your bank, you may already have maybe that RSA one-time password generator for your online account transactions, whereas this is maybe some online service provider, right? And right now they ask you username, password, and there's obviously all kinds of security problems with that too. So the idea is that also for that reason, it may be of interest for these parties to sort of refer to a central party that they're going to rely on to do the authentication. And now, so basically, I'm just going to use my RSA token in this case and authenticate there. And so, right, and then they'll basically just say, okay, this is Stefan, right? Or so what happens in this architecture, what Liberty calls this a circle of trust. Because, trust is a very difficult word. Who trusts whom with what? And this is actually causing a lot of the lack of adoption these days. And I'll get into sort of the breakdown of what the various trust issues are, and for users and for we call these relying parties, also because they're relying on statements. And in fact, so some more terminology. This is called an assertion, or a statement. So there's this, I think Google actually implemented this for enterprise search. There's SAML 2.0, a standard that came out of Liberty and some other efforts that united. And there was a SAML 1.1, and now 2.0 is sort of the state of the art. But this is really a language, a markup language, to package any kind of assertion, which could be a citizen of the Netherlands, right, my name or whatever, package them in some standard format that can be recognized, so it's called a SAML assertion, which can have one or more statements in it, which are really attribute value pairs. Now, so, okay, so So it's not that, that it's kind of what you do in a social circumstance often too, right? When you meet a friend and there's someone new with them, and what you're really doing is in a way starting an account relation with them, if you look at it in the abstract way, and you're kind of like, so who is this person? And your friend will tell you, and you trust them to tell you correctly. And so, you know, when this is the first time that you're going to sort of interact with this new party or person, you may accept, in fact, any name. Doesn't matter. You're going to open sort of an account. But next time you see them again, you know, you need that reference. Is that the same person again? And so let's say you don't see that person standing around the corner there. So I may ask Marius, who's that person there that I'm talking with? Because I can't see him. And Marius will say, oh, that's Ben. And I'm going to rely on that, right? So this is actually, that's this mechanism, but then fully automated. Now, so that works in certain trust settings. Depending on, I'm the relying party, I'm going to ultimately provide a service to, in this case, Ben as a user. So if you break it down, there are a lot of security concerns that I might have or might not have. So to what extent can I rely on Marius to tell me who the person is that I'm dealing with out of people that I already have account relations with? Because Marius obviously has the power to say anything he wants, and so he could basically make me believe I'm dealing with another person. And so depending on what the service is that I'm going to provide, I may have a big problem with that, or in fact my user may end up getting damage of some sort. So if you look at it, then really this whole circle of trust notion that was advocated by Liberty Alliance. And so what they said was, oh, it's decentralized because everybody can form their own circle of trust. If you're a bunch of organizations, you can pick your own identity provider, and that will, right? So the user, by the way, so only authenticates once. So in this mechanism, the initial one was called IDFF by the Liberty Alliance, right? So I go here, that's how I'm online, I go here, they need to know who I am, I get redirected. They basically say, make this assertion, maybe it gets redirected through me over there, and they say, this is Stefan, or the person that I know is Stefan, and so now he's been authenticated because I trust this party, I'll let him in, right? And when I then go there, through certain mechanisms, one is cookies, but there are other mechanisms as well that are more preferable. When I go here, it's possible to discover that I have already authenticated here, so there's no need to again do so. I'm still in the same session. So, right, so I basically, as a user, I only authenticate once at the start of the whole session, and then wherever I visit during that session, let's think of the typical example of the online sitting behind your computer experience. So you no longer need to give, so you get the single sign-on experience for the duration of your whole session. Now, all right, so the other thing that Liberty Alliance was saying is, okay, so first of all, this is protecting your privacy because anyone can be an identity provider. And then they added a twist, which is interesting, because as I said in the setup, if you look at these parties, when I deal with all of those parties, especially when they're separate organizations, they may not all know me under the same identifier. In fact, if the whole world would know me under a unique identifier, we get awfully big, close to, well, we will have essentially Big Brother's capabilities there, right? It's the equivalent of a national or a world identity card. Same identifier wherever I go. So they actually got a lot of pushback, especially in Europe, from privacy commissioners and so forth, who said, you know what, we don't accept these architectures for distributed use for government-to-citizen interactions and so forth. And in fact, they're even problematic when in large organizations, when this is an employee. The fact that wherever the employee would go, that he can be, that it's a unique identifier may be problematic when these are branches of the organization that sit in different countries. Depending on, there's all this complicated legislation. So what Liberty did was they said, we're going to add a thing and they call it pseudonyms. And so So basically, I need to go back here when. So when I go here, so I want to visit here. Let's say they know me as Stephen or as Brands, right? Not necessarily the same name as they know me under here, this central party. So what Liberty did was they said, you know, after authenticating in a more strong way, presumably over here, the actual statement that this party makes here doesn't have to be my name with them. It can be an alias. And in fact, so I don't want to elaborate too much on the technicalities, but it could be a random number. Each time I go back here, this party simply associates that random number for this party with my name. It says, oh, Stefan over here is called Donald Duck. Right? So when I have to authenticate there, it simply says, oh, that's Donald Duck. So let him in, right? And here he can give me these other names, so there could be random numbers. In fact, there are two ways to do it. One is it's a random number, and here they just pick a local name for me that they already have, and they associate the two. But the thing is that so Liberty claims this protects the user's privacy, and to a certain degree it does, because in that sense, these parties, if all they get is sort of these random numbers here, and that will just allow them, when you come back, to say, oh, it's the same person as before for this, it's this account, right? So basically, there's no creation of a unique identifier. So they cannot collude, put their data together and say, oh, Stefan over here is S-Brands over there, and is Steph over here, and so we can profile him and whatever, right? We can just link all his transactions. So now, of course, so that's the official story for federation. What you're actually doing with federation is you're actually linking different accounts by creating a correlation handle. This is sort of internally how the technical people talk about it, because the first time I have a relation with this party, and now let's say this identity provider gets introduced, and it also has a relation with me. And it knows me under a certain name. The first time I start using this party, it authenticates me here. It maybe sends out a random number, but in any case, what happens is that it's going to say, oh, the person that I know is Stefan Brands is going to use that random number over there, or this nickname or alias, and this party here is going to say, okay, this random number I'll use for that user. So what has really happened by doing this the first time is what the technical experts really call, that's the federation. It's a different word for linking accounts. So I have linked, because this is also an account relation. So what I have done is I have linked two accounts. It's just that this party doesn't know the account linking information. But this party, if they get together, these two, of course, they know exactly, oh, this person here corresponds to that person there, or the identity, right? Account, whatever you call it. So now, so the act of federation is really one of a one-time process of linking accounts. And of course, you do the same with all these other parties. But now let's look at the so now let's look at what this really means in terms of trust and privacy and security and autonomy and all these vague words that are so incredibly important for real-life adoption. So, you know, the federated pitch sounds kind of appealing. User gets a single sign-on experience. In a session, he can go to all of these parties that he needs to log into, and he only needs to log in once. He may never see the central party in that circle of trust. So very convenient. Secondly, user may get extra security, right? Because with all this phishing stuff going on, this could be username password, and now this could be an RSA one-time password generator or something else that may be more secure against phishing attacks. It's all a matter of degree, of course. So user gets some security benefits, and you can also argue user gets some privacy benefits, or at least his privacy doesn't get worse, because these parties they continue to know him as they used to know him, and they don't get new correlation powers, that sort of these, what's double-click style powers, right? That can aggregate everything across all your activity domains. From these parties' perspectives, you could say, gee, you know, if instead of having to set up username, password, enrolling people and so forth, and maybe giving them security tokens, they can offload all of that to this party who already may have that. So they cut a lot of their cost, and so that's a big benefit for them, right? And the benefit of these user benefits that are their clients, so they may attract more customers. So, you know, there are a lot of good aspects to this that it brings to service providers, relying parties, whatever you call them, and users. But now let's look at the problems, potential problems. And again, it's just a matter of the ultimate setting, whether or not these problems really matter to the participants. So first of all, so let's say an important concept is that of autonomy, which is how autonomous are these relying parties vis-a-vis the central party and each other, and what's the user's autonomy? It's a vague word, as I said, so, but it's kind of the independent, it has aspects of privacy and all of that, but also competitive intelligence and so forth. Now, let's start with these relying parties. First of all, whenever a relying party deals with me, right, they put full trust in this central party. It can claim whatever they want about who I am. So there could be a security risk. So you have to trust, they have to trust this party with not sort of impersonating. For instance, they could impersonate me and access my account here, right? Which could be an insider here, or management, or a virus that has infiltrated, a hacker or whatever. They have the power to impersonate anyone they want over here. Of course, Liberty says, you know, but they don't necessarily know who I am over here, because that may be another name, right? So, but again, it's just a matter of how difficult is it to do the attack, and there are ways to get around it if you're a little bit more determined. So basically, this party, if you think about it, it may also, let's say this is an autonomous party, right? It's a merchant maybe. The fact is that when the user connects in real time, this party will know, oh, user is connecting over here. So it can falsely deny access. It can, but it also knows user's name and access point. So, which could be competitive intelligence, right? If this is national defense, it's a police office, there's a police officer that's putting a note online into a register, and there's some central department that's being corrupted. They can track and trace exactly which police officer or secret agent, let's say, is inserting information at what point, you know, which could be a problem. If it's a merchant, it's like, hey, this central party will learn all my client identities, which, in effect, if you think about it, this architecture, the federation, is in fact the credit card architecture, right? So, like in a credit card architecture, the credit card company, I mean, there are a lot of players there, but let's look at it as one party. It's just broken up into all kinds of processes that may be managed by different companies. But there are certainly some of them, like First Data and so forth, right? So they see exactly which consumer is going where at what time. So they may have an idea of what you're buying there. So in a general identity sense, that holds true as well. So anyway, so it could be competitive intelligence, it could be security issues, it could be privacy issues. The fact that it knows at what time which user is visiting. Now, so basically, so the trust, it's not black and white. It's not like I trust this party with making these authentication statements. I mean, there are a lot of things you have to place your trust in, right? You may trust the party with one thing, but not necessarily 5 other things. So, from the user's perspective, so there's the impersonation capability, the false denial of access capability, the privacy or sort of the monitoring capabilities that exist across the entire circle, like with a credit card company, so they can get a lot of valuable information that neither of these will ever get. And so, in fact, my suspicion has always been that, you know, that there are sort of perverse incentives, is a general term, right, for organizations to claim, hey, we protect your privacy because we do not allow these parties to link, because we give you them aliases here, so they never learn you under a unique identifier. But the other incentive could be, by preventing these parties from learning that, this party has more power in gathering all that information that these will never get. And so now, well, after 5 years of rollout experiments, the interesting thing is that a lot of these kind of concerns have actually popped up. That, let's say this is a mobile operator and these are service providers in the mobile space, and they're like, gee, this party is going to know all my client data. You know, it may not know what I store in my account, but it does have a lot of other information, like the credit card company. I'm not comfortable with that. And so what you actually see is that these parties, when they're more autonomous, that they refuse to participate with these bigger players. So the sort of the rollout of circles of trust so far has really been within the enterprise, because then these are sort of resources owned by the company. It's all owned by the company, right? So that's not a problem. And sort of the slightly extended enterprise. And so the typical one is a travel agency. These are travel agencies, and this is Visa. So these travel agencies, they're struggling to survive. So are they going to say, you know what, we're not going to play with Visa? They sort of have to. You know, it's kind of either we're dead or we go along. But if that's a MasterCard, they're not going to play this with a Visa over there, right? So so the idea was, of course, you know, everybody then carve out their own circle of trust, all these big players, and they all basically get some small players that are willing to be satellite companies in that circle of trust, and they're fine with handing over all that power. So the idea was, let's cover all these risks with legal liability contracts and so forth. And so it turns out also to be very heavy to set up, because there's a ton of negotiations that have been going on between all these parties in practice to address all the legal liabilities, right? Because when this party is making statements, what if something goes wrong here, and this party gives access to the wrong person, and this user says, I'm going to sue you because you leaked my data to someone else. Now they're going to go here and they say, you made the mistake. And so what liability does that party have, right? So these things also stagnate the adoption, because this party has a lot of power, and it can make errors and so forth. Now, from the user's perspective, of course, the other thing is that, do you really get privacy? So, as you know, like like companies like Integrity, that one has been bought, of course, a while ago. They've been rolling out successfully federated identity infrastructures for the corporation. What that really means is, right, within the corporation, this is, let's say, a door on the floor at which you work. This is a Word document online in some project file that you're working, a project you're working on, and this is whatever, right? Some VPN access, some resource that you access over VPN, or it's your email or whatever. So this is the central identity server in the company, right? So that's what it is. So you go here, and it resolves who you are, and maybe even it sends some data about you here, about what privileges you have. And so, you know, so in an enterprise setting, when you're an employee, you may be as a user, right? There are lots of different users again. So employee is one user that doesn't have a lot of autonomy when they work in corporate time and they access these resources. It's kind of fair, maybe, you know, to a certain degree, that they can monitor centrally in real time all your actions. And obviously there are some sensitivities already right there, because some people have a legitimate use to be at work and do something for personal reasons. There's an emergency or whatever, and in fact, obviously in today's technology climate, where people work long hours, so they have to be able to do stuff in between from work that is personal. You know, so there are sensitivities, and there are actually laws as well about. So there's a surveillance capability there. But now let's say you're not a different, more autonomy. You're not an employee in work time, right? So the second step is you're an employee who's in work time but needs to do something personal. It's already a little bit more of a concern to you that this power is, this can just keep a file with all your actions, right? Logged in here and there at this time, and was in the bathroom for an hour there or whatever. So now let's say you're a business partner, and you work on a project, and you have to access project files over there. So now, in that case, you're not working for them, and you or your company may actually figure, is it necessary that every time my employee in the joint project is accessing a project file, that they can see exactly which of my employees is accessing that file? I mean, that's competitive information. They may see who are my most productive employees and so forth, and all they need to know maybe is that out of the 50 people that are working on this, he's authorized to make edits to this document. You know, it's just a random example. You can, to clarify the kind of sensitivities that there are that have to do with the autonomy, it's the word that I use. As I said, it encompasses privacy, security, competitive intelligence, all these things you have in the real world. That it's hard to just enumerate them. You know, so if, and let's say the ultimate autonomous party is sort of like you as an individual. You're maybe a consumer online, right? So you visit resources at Yahoo or eBay. Maybe, you know, they could start asking you to log in more and more, right, for different areas that you're accessing. So, you know, so is it necessary that they can trace all your behavior when you're just browsing for what you might want to purchase? Now, so there, because you're more autonomous, you may have more concerns about the powers that are in there to track and trace all your behavior. And let's say you're a citizen in a government online, and 10 years from now, all your government services are modernized, and they've all been, right, you access them online. May not just be through your laptop or computer, but by a chip card with wireless connectivity. You know, it could be public transport, whatever way you go, it's sort of, and it would work like this, right? So entering a bus is just an access point. Maybe, you know, it's going to be like your card, it sits in your wallet, it's just going to authenticate essentially to a central organization in government and provision whatever data is necessary for the bus driver to say, okay, you have access, right? You're a senior citizen, for instance, so, or you get a discount or whatever. I mean, these are examples, but you can come up with millions of them in different circumstances. So would you be comfortable with a society like that, where there is a central a party that can track and trace all your behavior in real time and deny you access to any service when they want to? Well, maybe not, right? And in Europe, of course, that's a little bit more sensitive because of our experiences in the World War, where these tracking and tracing mechanisms have been used successfully by the Germans. Now, of course, if these systems get out there on a large scale, there are concerns, and one of the big problems is that, so in a small circle of trust, right, it starts within an organization, let's say. So what it really does is, it's not decentralizing within, it's creating a centralized authentication capability and identification capability. And yes, there may be, let's say, different companies all have their own identity server, right? But across these circles, so if you have a circle there and a circle there, we cannot do for the user. I have to, when I go to a resource here and then to here, now I need to authenticate here. So I lose my single sign-on experience and all the benefits. This circle is still a silo as much as this circle is. So the evolution is going to be like in a credit card business, where let's say that's a Visa and that's a MasterCard. So I don't want to have different, right? I want to do the same with these. I mean, these silos are just expanding at the perimeter a bit. That's how you can look at it. So, but to allow free flow and to continue that growth process, these parties, these identity providers, they're naturally going to search to form a super identity provider. All they need to do is, right, here they know me as, let's say this party knows me as Stefan Brands, and I have some authentication token, and it says, okay, Donald Duck here, Mickey Mouse over there, Goofy over there, whatever, or aliases, right? And it keeps track of them here, and here this party may know me as S-Brands. Again, so it's the same problem, they cannot, but I can federate between these two. And so then they just basically put their account information together and say, okay, S-Brands is the same person there. Here he has these 3 aliases, there he has those 3 aliases with these parties, so now he has 6 aliases. So it's simply, and this is going to be a natural evolution. So the whole decentralized story is a little bit dubious when you bring it to larger scale, society-wide scale, because there's going to be a rise. I mean, those are speculations, but what we see now is that Yeah, there are identity providers that are starting to begin, and people are like, oh, there's going to be millions of them. But yeah, that's organic growth, right? So the reality is over time, some of them will be more successful. They have strong authentication relations. Relying parties feel more comfortable with relying on them, better security, and so forth. So they're going to naturally pick some of them, and there's going to be acquisition of these identity providers. Could all be in the next 20 years, whatever, let's say, right? And there's going to be some powerhouses, like the ones that we have today, like Axiom and so forth, that no one has heard of. They're natural parties, of course, to be identity providers. The more they know about you already, and so as we build society, it gets kind of scary what the implications are. So because these powers, the central surveillance powers, impersonation powers, false denial of access powers, are there for both users and relying parties. And whether or not that's a problem, it's also a matter of scale. You may not worry when it's a lightweight service you give here, but for very sensitive services, you may definitely worry about these capabilities. And the more players are in the circle of trust, you may get more concerns. So it's all a matter of scale as well. Now, so here's something that today is called user-centric identity. And how much time do I have left? It's 10:50, so 5 minutes? Yeah, sure. So, the idea is really one that it's instead of the cards in your wallet, right? It's a metaphor that many have been using, but if you think about it, the cards in my wallet are statements made by central parties about me that I show to others. So it could be an identifier, right? Which is a passport. It could have all kinds of other information on it, health insurance cards, driver licenses, and so forth. And so you can think of all these statements that a party might make as there are assertions, as I said, statements, claims. There's different language for it. Now, so instead of these statements going in real time, either directly or redirected through me to a party over there, it's actually possible to involve me more as a user, right? And the ultimate involvement, of course, is kind of the idea what you get when you have the cards in your wallet, paper-based credentials, which is that when I need to show information over here, there is no central party involved at that very moment. I just pull out a card, whatever the information is they need to see. It comes from this party. They can see the authenticity of the statement, and I present it at any time. I can show the data that I need to show. So it's an offline transaction. And in fact, with the plastic cards, when I wave my card and you need to know I live in Quebec, you look at it. Okay, Quebec. There's no sort of audit trail that stays behind necessarily that allows these parties, even if they get together, to track and trace all my interactions on that basis, right? Of course, we have very limited cards today because they're kind of expensive and so forth. But in a digital world, it's possible to do the exact same mechanism. And of course, this traces back to the roots of when I worked at DigiCash, where Marius worked as well, much longer than I did. That's why I brought in the credit card example as well. Like in the payments are really a matter of assertions or claims that are made by central parties about value. If you think about it, identity, digital identity is really any kind of assertion about a party, a user, a chip, or an application, whatever it is. It's a very general thing, and so like in the payments business, you have lots and lots of different payment mechanisms. So you have these sort of centralized ones that resolve everything in the back end, like credit cards, debit cards, and all you do is sort of authenticate once, so they know who you are, and then data flows in the back end, right? That's what it is. In that case, it flows from one account to another. It's an attribute here that says $50 that gets decremented, and here it gets incremented by 50, and transfer of $50 has taken place. So that's effectively once they have linked up the accounts, they can transfer in the backend attribute information about me, and it's account balance information. So if you look in the real world, we have, in the payments analogy, we have cash, right? So which I take out of an account, and I can store it, and I can present it anywhere where I want. It's unforgeable, it's self-authenticating, and it gives me privacy, because there's actually nothing in the coins that can be linked back to my identifier, let alone a globally unique identifier. So it's possible to do all these things digitally, and mimic for the relying parties and sort of the identity providers the same exactly the same experience, because ultimately this is just a data flow issue, right? They need to receive assertions from this party about me, and they have data about me already in their account. And so how that data gets there, whether it's a matter of I sort of authenticate and now my accounts are linked up and they can transfer directly or directed through me with all the problems that it gives rise to, or whether that data actually flows really through me and I can even store it in long-lived form, and I can, when I show it, there is no linkage. There's no common identifier. They get what they want. Exactly the same information. So their experience can remain the same if you build it properly. So of course what it means is there's more, and this is why this hasn't happened in the real world, and it's very frustrating for people like me who've worked way too long on this stuff, that what's been holding back the adoption is that the federated mechanism does not require a smart client. You can do this, and it's been designed for that with a zero-footprint browser. I mean, there are weaknesses with it, but you know, with ever more sophisticated phishing attacks, man, in real time. But you can do these redirections and post data and whatever with standard browsers. So people don't like running Java applets, or let alone installing executables and so forth. So goes the argument, at least. Whereas this requires client intelligence. Of course, now, in contrast to when we were struggling at DigiCash, now these devices are all out there, and they're powerful to do all the sophisticated processing. And you know, to become a first-class sort of citizen, that's ultimately what I'll end up with, is to be a real participant in an identity infrastructure. You cannot have all the rights that may matter or do matter without also being intelligent, right? I mean, it's actually hard. That's the irony in a way. You cannot expect to address all these challenges in a way that leaves the client literally dumb. You need intelligence here, and you know, so mobile phones and so forth, they're ideal vehicles. And so we actually, as a startup, that's why we had Nokia as an early stage investor. So if they were also contributor, one of the main ones to Liberty Alliance. So unfortunately, the field is moving very slow, and you know, but Google, of course, would be a nice party to because you control the desktop more and more, to actually, you know, you could build this stuff in that's very user-centric. Microsoft has been doing this with card space, which is coming out, I don't know, 1 or 2 weeks from now in the consumer version of Vista. And my guess is that 1 or 2 big, well, they've announced 2 very big players will come forward and say, we're going to be identity providers in card space, which is more user-centric, but it has all kinds of problems that it hasn't addressed yet. And so it's probably a Citibank and a Visa. I'm speculating, but yeah, as a Google, you know, I would say would be good to be involved in this, and the whole "do no evil" mantra obviously fits nicely with something like user empowerment. So I'll leave it at that. I have 20 more slides. As I said, I wanted to give the basics. I think it's important. So.
Anecdotally, in some of the implementations of federated identity and user-centric identity, the pseudonymity property, I think, isn't always preserved, or it fails in implementation because of out-of-band communication. There's so many different out-of-band ways you interact with all of your service providers, that you eventually leak all of your identity information. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, so basically the question is, are the privacy properties of identity mechanisms contravened by traceability at the transport layer, or just the ability to correlate data in the backend or in other ways? And yes, certainly that takes away the pure privacy that you could get at the identity data flow level. So if your IP addresses leak, right? So yes, so they can maybe use to link you. So ultimately, over time, you know, it's not just at the data flow level, at the application level that the privacy needs to be protected. It should also be protected in other ways. Your policy and so forth will never go out the window. But the example that I do give to make it clear that it doesn't really contravene the benefits of these identity mechanisms that protect privacy is really this one. Today, you can pay with cash or credit card when you go to a brick and mortar store. Now, when you pay with cash, the fact that the merchant may have a digital camera hanging above the counter, does that imply that paying by cash no longer gives you more privacy than paying by credit card? No, because you know, if you look at the sort of the attack model, then in the cache model with the digital cameras, to monitor all your actions, there's a lot of work that has to be done. There are uncertainties, there are error probabilities, multiple parties have to be involved that may not want to be involved. Whereas in the credit card model, all the linking and tracing data is automatically delivered to the central party, right? So there's a big difference. So it's, you know. Well, thank you for your attention.